What is up, everyone? I'm your host, Jared Harris, and this is Beats by Jer. This week is the final episode of my three-part series focusing on releases from 2022, highlighting what made it an exciting year for new music. Today, we'll be looking at the Red Hot Chili Peppers and how they continue to defy, or rather elevate, the idea of a legacy band through the release of their two albums, Unlimited Love and Return of the Dream Canteen, along with their massive global tour. Let's start with the idea of a legacy band. This is an artist decades deep into their career who, at one point, had numerous hits and a number of successful albums. This is an artist well established in the industry with a loyal audience. Often, new material for a legacy artist is inconsequential. Whether there is any or regardless of its quality, the artist can, likely, without fail, still pack in arenas ranging from 10 to 30,000 people. This is not a slight against artists in this position. After all, they managed to find longevity out of their music and are entitled to take their career in this direction. This is something we see a lot with artists from the 70s and 80s. However, there are also artists who continue to approach their work like they still have something to prove despite being much later in their career, and often do so through exciting new releases and a live show that does much more than indulge the nostalgia of an era and a series of hits long gone. In particular, I'm thinking about artists like Bruce Springsteen, Metallica, and Pearl Jam. With a pair of double albums and a massive global tour, 2022 saw the Red Hot Chili Peppers dive deep into this latter category of legacy artists with what could very well be among the biggest year of their career. While discussing these records briefly in episode 1, we're going to look at them on a much deeper level in terms of the significance of what 2022 meant for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. A large reason for their success, however, comes from John Frusciante's return to the band, the third coming of John Frusciante. I previously stated that I could not think of another artist who has returned to a band for a third time, having departed twice already. And having done some research, the only musician that I could actually find was Christy McVie, having joined Fleetwood Mac from 1970 to 1996. Then again rejoining in 1997 to 1998. And then finally again in 2014 until her passing in 2022. I did some digging. I could not find anyone else who has had 3 separate entry points into the same band. Both Unlimited Love and Return of the Dream Canteen performed strong on the charts. Unlimited Love peaked at number 1 in 16 countries, including the Big 3 charts, the US Billboard 200, Billboard's top alternative albums, and Billboard's top rock albums. Return of the Dream Canteen peaked at number 1 in 10 countries, also including the Billboard top alternative albums and the top rock albums, and peaking at number 3 on Billboard's top 200. While it's a dangerous metric to compare art through its commercial status when we're looking at a band through the context of having such a phenomenal year as well as their status and their longevity, this is a viable metric, something that we should most certainly take into consideration. However, this, of course, does not speak to the value of the actual music. Looking at the global stadium tour in a nutshell, I saw the band perform in August at Toronto's Rogers Centre, or the Sky Dome, as it should be called. However, previously, I had seen the band perform at the Air Canada Centre on 2 occasions on the I'm With You tour and the Getaway tour. Just for the sake of context, the Air Canada Centre is roughly a 14,000 seat venue, depending on how the artist chooses to divide seats and standing, as well as the stage. And the Rogers Centre Sky Dome is roughly 45 to 50,000 per capacity. Their performance in Toronto in 2022 was sold out. Listening to the Broken Record podcast, a podcast between Rick Rubin and Malcolm Gladwell, around the release of Unlimited Love, Rubin hosted a number of conversations with different members of the Chili Peppers, and there was one point where John Frusciante, as they approached the start of their European leg, He was kind of like, we'd played stadiums before, and then he remembered walking into these venues that they were playing and seeing that these were not the same stadiums that they had done before, and they were significantly larger, and he was quite astounded by that. It's rare that a band of this size just kind of continues to get bigger, and that is exactly what happened in 2022. This tour was huge. It saw them hit up all across North America, Europe, Asia, Australia, South America. Some of these were entirely new markets like Singapore, and many of them were also markets that are visited less frequently outside of the festival circuit, including parts of Asia and South America. The tour was huge. It's crazy to think that a band that formed over 40 years ago in 1982, especially given all they've overcome from the death of Hilo Slovak to numerous lineup changes, has been able to return once again and have the biggest year yet in their career. It's truly inspiring to see. By all means, the Red Hot Chili Peppers are a legacy band. They have a solid career of records, hits, and were instrumental to becoming part of the sound of a generation. And they've also been able to continue selling out arenas for decades without wavering, largely based on the strength of their back catalog. But 2022 saw the band reinvent the legacy model in a way that only few artists have been able to do so. As I stated in episode 1, Unlimited Love is the kind of album you make when you're looking for a comeback. It is a double album collecting 17 pop-funk, pop-rock songs, full of potential singles, songs otherwise safe for mainstream exposure, and yet the record was somehow uncompromising despite this. As I said in my initial album review for the Spill magazine, there is much to celebrate on the latest album from the Chili Peppers. Not only does Unlimited Love thrive as a nearly flawless collection of 17 tracks without even the faintest hint of a weak song, but the record does the impossible by exceeding the hype of Frusciante's return. This in itself is the most impressive feat that the Red Hot Chili Peppers achieved with their return, their comeback album, Unlimited Love. Aside from the singles, highlights include The Great Apes, She's a Lover, Bastards of Light, One Way Traffic, and the Frusciante-led The Heavy Wing. These songs in particular stand out as examples of up-tempo funk, bridging rock and pop. It's just a really fun album front to back. The lead into this album was particularly impressive. It started on April 1st, 2022 with the release of Black Summer, their first single and music video, their first hint of new music with John Frusciante on guitar. And an important footnote, it was the band's 14th single to go to number 1. This would be followed by additional singles, including Poster Child, Not the One, and These Are the Ways, the latter of which would come after the record was released and was accompanied with a very cinematic music video seeing Anthony Kiedis being chased by a police officer. Very fun watch. Additionally, the band performed on Kimmel, Fallon, and Stern. They launched their own Sirius XM channel and hosted performances at the Fonda Theater and Amoeba Records, both in Los Angeles. There was also numerous podcast conversations, most notably including 8 episodes of the Broken Record podcast, hosted by Rick Rubin, and not to mention numerous features in multiple magazine cover stories, including Consequence, NME, and Guitar World. The media cycle surrounding this album was huge, and without a doubt was the most central the band had been in popular culture since the mega release that surrounded Stadium Arcadium back in 2008. Not only does a massive launch like this instill a sense of confidence and passion in their work, but it pulls the listener in. The most hardcore niches of their audience feel truly engaged in the process as it eventually spreads out to hit the radars of the more casual fans. It makes the album feel less of a collected piece of music, but more like an entire experience. It feels interactive and engaging. There's momentum leading into the release and a strong follow-through. In this case, the follow-through was the massive world tour. As the Red Hot Chili Peppers continued to hit the road throughout 2023, 2022 saw them perform 99 shows across the world. 28 in Europe, 51 in North America, 8 in Oceania, 3 in Asia, and 9 in South America. The tour was the 7th highest grossing of all of 2022, grossing a total of $177 million, and is the band's highest grossing tour to date. Remember, 40 years into their career. Few dates, even as they continue through the year, had an attendance below 38,000 people, and most dates were sold out or approaching the sold out threshold. Openers ranged from The Strokes, A$AP Rocky, Beck, Haim, St. Vincent, Anderson .Paak, Nas, Thundercat, King Princess, Post Malone, Iggy Pop, The Mars Volta, and City and Colour. For the sake of context, it's important to note that most legacy artists, with the exception of the Rolling Stones, Bruce Springsteen, and maybe the Foo Fighters, do not perform at venues of this size. These are venues often reserved for the biggest artists of our time, right? This is the kind of rooms that Taylor Swift is performing at The Weeknd. This is not typical of a legacy band. Having spoken about the Sky Dome and Taylor Swift, I would be remiss not to mention this footnote. Literally a day after recording this episode, Taylor Swift announced that her Eras Tour would be extended into the later half of 2023, including not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, but 6 shows at the Rogers Center back to back. I don't know if that's ever been done before. I don't know. It feels unprecedented. I don't know if anyone's ever done that. It's hella impressive. And if she can pull that off, even if you sold out just half of those, that's incredibly impressive. But 6 shows at the Rogers Center. Wow. Good for Taylor. About halfway through summer 2022, the Red Hot Chili Peppers were in the midst of their North American leg of their tour, and this is where they decided to announce the release of their second double album for the year, Return of the Dream Canteen. Compared to Unlimited Love, this was a much more quiet lead-up, and was almost used as a means of continuing the tour, along with the excitement that the band experienced within the first half of the year. Like I mentioned before in episode 1, this felt like the kind of record that was far more geared towards their original audience, their less hits-oriented audience. It is not the type of record you make when looking for a comeback. The album was preceded by the release of Tip of My Tongue, along with a truly psychedelic music video, and much closer to the release, the single Eddie, the band's tribute to Eddie Van Halen. Following the album, a third single, a second music video, The Drummer, would be released. When doing research for today's episode, I saw that someone had referenced my work, my review for the Spill magazine, on the Return of the Dream Canteen Wikipedia page under the reception header. I will not lie, I geeked out seeing my work referenced on a Red Hot Chili Peppers Wikipedia page. Whoever did that, much love. Thank you so much. You are the MVP. That being said, I believe this quote stands true to the essence of the record. Overall, Return of the Dream Canteen feels like a less mainstream Unlimited Love. Written and recorded during the same sessions, this is only natural. However, there's an element of creativity and reckless abandon to Return of the Dream Canteen that sees the pop influences of the sessions, while still present, take a back seat. These aren't B-sides, nor are they leftovers. Instead, Return of the Dream Canteen is a weirder and far more experimental record. From the hard funk of Tip of My Tongue and Peace and Love, the sideways, off-kilter groove behind Bella, Fake as Fuck just being so reminiscent of Nobody Weird Like Me with its tempo changes and its halftime outro. Bag of Grins, I've talked about this song a lot, but just the songwriting, the structure, the sludgy, almost Alice in Chains tone of the song, but the use of that bridge coming out of the use of the bridge being introduced and then coming into halfway of the final chorus, reintroducing the bridge as a means of leading into the outro section was just phenomenal songwriting, and it really takes you by surprise. The 3/4 waltz funk of Copperbelly, like who makes a funk song in 3/4? These guys do. And of course, the Hendrixy blues of "Carry Me Home" is just, considering this band has covered Hendrix numerous times, Fire, Castles Made of Sand, Little Miss Lover. It's really cool to see them take that Hendrixy sound and perform it so overtly rather than in the subliminal lead lines from Frusciante. Front to back, there's not a song on this record that I skip. I loved it all. And like I said, this is not the album you make when trying to create a comeback, but it is the album that can find success after a comeback has been made. And that is where the synthesis, the connection between Unlimited Love and Return of the Dream Canteen is so essential. Having been released within the same year, recorded in the same sessions, it's impossible not to make these connections, but Return of the Dream Canteen truly builds off of the foundation of the band's current sound, and it really makes use of that experimental nature. There are very few singles in the conventional sense on this album, and that feels very intentional compared to the mainstream capabilities of its predecessor. In theory, these are two very similar albums, but their differences feel so vast in comparison. And in releasing them so close together, it's almost as though the Red Hot Chili Peppers have created an entirely new era of their sound out of these two albums. The Unlimited Love, the Return of the Dream Canteen sound marks a totally modern era for the band, and this is, of course, only furthered by the grandiose nature of the tour that surrounded the two records. Initially, upon reviewing both albums for the Spill magazine, I had given Unlimited Love a 10 out of 10, and a large part of that just being so swept into the hype of Frusciante's return, the fact that there was a new Red Hot Chili Peppers album, being a lifelong fan. My first tattoo, of course, being the asterisk slapped right onto my left forearm. And just the excitement, the excitement of being swept up in that huge press and media cycle that led into the album. And shortly after that, I gave Return of the Dream Canteen a 9 out of 10 because having heard the record a couple days early, big shout out to Warner for sending that over, it didn't stand out the same way. Again, there was just so much more singles on Unlimited Love. There was so much more hype surrounding the record. And, on first listen to writing the review in the wee hours of the morning, trying to get it in before the album actually released, I'll gladly admit that maybe right away I didn't quite get Return of the Dream Canteen the way that I got Unlimited Love. It's a record that requires a bit more unpacking. It's a record that requires more attention. It's a record that almost demands that you listen to it more before you get it. Looking back on it now, I would say that Unlimited Love is maybe an 8.5, a 9 out of 10. Return of the Dream Canteen is a solid 10 out of 10. There's so much to both records. There is so much nuance to it, but the overall alternative tone, the creativity for the sake of creativity, the risk-taking, the danger that's present on Return of the Dream Canteen is something that just appeals to me more and is something that I love to hear from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Musically, this does not sound like a band that has been disrupted by lineup changes over the course of the last 4 decades. This is a band performing as if all 4 members have been together since '82. Flea and Frusciante ebb and flow between leading the band and supporting the other in ways that no other pair could. Chad continues to groove hard while coming up with inventive beats and monstrous fills, and Anthony is someone that I am continuously impressed by, particularly on these 2 albums. He flips from being truly he's a true oddity. He's quirky, he's weird, he's fun, he's always been that character, but he's able to flip between that and having these moments of raw and emotional longing, something that feels so poignant and ever present on both albums. Particularly if we look at Return of the Dream Canteen, songs like the closing of the album, In the Snow, alongside La 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 La, and the likes of My Cigarette. There's an emotional longing in Kiedis's tone, in his melodies, and it's something that brings such a refreshing sense of maturity and refinement to the arrangements, and it's something that really feels unique. It's not entirely new. It's something that's been present on the likes of By the Way, and especially on Stadium Arcadium, but it's just done in such a way that the emotion of his voice and his lyrics really cuts through, and it just blends so nicely with the arrangements the band has come up with. Frusciante in particular also interests me on these records, as one of the reasons he stepped away from the band following Stadium Arcadium was saying that he felt too self-indulgent in the way he was approaching guitar and his solos. And it's true, the guitar solos on Stadium Arcadium are some of the best of his career, certainly some of the best in modern rock. I remember hearing stories of how the band would record largely live off the floor together, and he would just kind of leave those solo sections empty, and then he would overdub them, but he would play sometimes like 10, 20 different solos. Very David Gilmour, the way he would approach these solos in this way. And he would then kind of go through, listen to all these different solos, and would chop up the pieces that he thought were best, and then he would repurpose them into one brand new solo, the best of all these other efforts, and play it together into a single take. And that's why the guitar solos on Stadium Arcadium are so jaw-dropping, so methodical, and so stunning, so striking. On these records, these are not guitar solo albums. The most you get are the lead lines on The Great Apes. I really like it because if you really crank the speakers on that song, you could hear the space of the room surrounding Frusciante's guitar, right? They've got his amps all mic'd up, and definitely have a mic at the opposite end of the room, and you could hear the space surrounding his sound if you really, really crank the speakers on that one. But the most impressive solo is probably on Eddie. Again, this being the band's tribute to Eddie Van Halen, and Frusciante takes all these stylistic approaches that are synonymous with Eddie Van Halen, from the dive bombs and the tapping, the pinched harmonics, and he purposefully uses them throughout his solo as a means of paying homage. But he doesn't play an Eddie Van Halen solo. He plays a John Frusciante solo employing Eddie Van Halen techniques, and really takes these stylings, these techniques, in a direction that you would never hear Eddie take. And it's just so interesting to see two masters of their crafts approaching the use of the same techniques, but in completely different ways. It's a really fascinating look at a different direction that Eddie Van Halen could have taken with his sound, and it really makes you appreciate Van Halen's work to see just how applicable and versatile his sound could be to fit on such a sparse and spacious ballad like Eddie. But the solos on these records, they feel a lot more tasteful, a lot more sophisticated, a little more splash, rather than an all-encompassing wave that takes the song for a ride. Instead, Frusciante just fits in with Flea a lot more on these albums, right? He plays to Flea, Flea plays to him. They bounce off of one each other effortlessly. And if you really listen to Frusciante's lead lines, that's where it really shines, and that's where you start to hear a lot of the nuances. But also, again, Flea's chemistry and how the bass follows and then inspires Frusciante's next direction. It's a really interesting dynamic, something that is, I would argue, not in existence anywhere else between these two. Seeing the band perform in Toronto last August was truly surreal. I honestly thought that Frusciante was truly done with the band. I never expected to see this reunion. Um, but again, the show further illustrates this idea that they are more than a hits machine. They are more than there for the nostalgia. And of course, they did perform the hits, right? They opened with Can't Stop, they closed with By the Way, and in between that, there was Under the Bridge, Other Side, Danny California, Snow, Give It Away. But there was also a number of new songs off the record, off of, at the time, Unlimited Love, because Return of the Dream Canteen hadn't dropped yet. There was Heavy Wing, These Are the Ways, Black Summer. And then I was most thrilled with the B-sides, the songs that you didn't expect to hear. In particular, I Like Dirt, Soul to Squeeze, and Nobody Weird Like Me. 3 songs that, I was not expecting to hear and was so happy to hear those opening notes as the band went into them. Furthermore, the band threw in a slow burning, scorching cover of Funkadelic's What Is Soul. This originated out of a jam. Anyone that has any clue about the Red Hot Chili Peppers knows that these guys are almost a jam band, and the moments in between songs are filled with these organic jams led by Chad, Flea, or Frusciante. I like to imagine that before the band goes on stage, they kind of mark out where the jams will be, and maybe they mark out the key and who's going to start the jam, and everything else from there is improvised. They know where it's going to start, they know where it's going to end. Sometimes it goes directly into a song, sometimes it doesn't. But I like to think that the middle section is spontaneous, and night to night you would experience an almost entirely different show, even if they performed the exact same set list. And it's here that the musicianship really shines, of course, right? The chemistry between these 4 musicians is truly remarkable. It's so, having been in numerous jam situations, performing jazz and working in jazz workshops throughout post-secondary, it's so, the challenge in a free-form jam, the challenge when working with a loose structure is not to step on everyone else's toes. You want to play out, but you don't want to do so at the expense of the chemistry, at the expense of someone else. And there's not a moment where the Red Hot Chili Peppers do that, right? That it's almost as though they have such a refined sense of each other. They know each other musically in such an intimate way that there's no way that Flea is going to come in with a lead line that hinders what Frusciante is doing, or that feels counterintuitive to Smith's beat. And Chad's going to come in with a really big fill here, and it feels like the 3 of them are on the exact same wavelength, and it's truly impressive. It's truly inspiring to watch, and it's a certain highlight to their performance. And arguably, they're one of the few bands that you actually want to watch jam like that in between songs. Other artists, if they attempted to do this, it would almost feel like, okay, come on, let's get to the next song. But it's so ingrained in the nature of the Red Hot Chili Peppers that you want to hear the jams, you want to hear improvisation, you want to hear experimentation in a live setting. And it's something that feels so dangerous, so reckless, and is performed so flawlessly. I'm so curious by what is remaining from this era of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Following Unlimited Love, the band released a single, Nerve Flip. The track is like this garage rock, very 90s sort of approach, almost in tone with like early sort of Blur or like the Strokes. It's a really cool song, and I believe it was released on the Japanese vinyl version of Unlimited Love. But just a really cool offering to come out of this, post Unlimited Love. And the band did the exact same thing following Return of the Dream Canteen. They released a single, The Shape I'm Taking. It's this sort of melodic mellow song backed by this almost drum and bass feel from Chad, and there's also this really nice splash of delay on the drums, so there's this reverberating echo that almost feels like he's playing two drum tracks just ever so slightly out of sync with one another. It's a really cool effect. But that gives us 36 songs between these two singles and the two records. In an interview, I believe, with Ruben on the Broken Record podcast, Frusciante actually said that there's an entire third album's worth of material. I believe he said there's 48 songs that were written and recorded during this time. That leaves us with 12 more songs. Most curiously, Ruben reflected that they were some of his favorites from the session. So again, not necessarily leftovers, not necessarily B-sides, just more music. And like I said, Unlimited Love, Return of the Dream Canteen, these are two albums that are very similar, but also shine separately for their differences. I'm very curious if we will get a third Chili Peppers record near the end of this tour, maybe later this year. I guess at this point that might be a little rushed, but maybe in 2024 out of these sessions, I would be very, very excited to hear what else the band had cooked up during these sessions. Bringing this back to the identity of a legacy band, the reason this episode exists, the vehicle in which I use to gush about one of my favorite bands. A lot of questions are certainly raised. Like I said earlier in this episode, I'm not taking any slight against legacy artists, but it definitely makes you wonder, should we expect more from established artists? Should we expect them to continue to challenge themselves as musicians and take creative risks and direct their live shows in new territories, to create just these exciting and risky moments that capture the energy of that only can be captured by a live performance? How can established bands continue to do this, and how can they continue to create vital music while also creating these engaging and memorable moments for their audience? And I think that in itself is one of the most important things that any artist, new or old, can do. At the end of the day, that is the most important part of being a fan. It's those moments and those memories that you walk away with. The experience of being a fan and remembering, hearing the song for the first time, or seeing that music video, or seeing your favorite artist grace the cover of a big magazine, and, lining up to meet them or to buy the record or whatever. It's stories like these and moments like these that make your connection to an artist all the more special and unique. And I think having obsessively watched the Red Hot Chili Peppers take on 2022 the way they did, that is the lesson learned. There is a greater narrative to this, and 2022 was about creating such a memorable and engaging fan experience that 20 years down the road, you can look back and say, yeah, I remember they did this music video, and then they were on Howard Stern, and there was all these interviews surrounding the album, and then the record finally came out and it lived up to the hype of the return. It's when you have these moments, it makes your stories that much more exciting, and it makes your connection almost bulletproof. It is this greater narrative that makes this particular era of the Red Hot Chili Peppers among their most important. Something that is even more impressive and rare for a band to deliver this deep into their career. And they should most certainly be applauded for taking the creative risks that they continue to take, and for creating such a special and engaging year for their audience. And there you have it. Thank you for tuning in to my 3-part series, which focused on music from 2022. Next week, Join me as we look at some of the coolest albums to come out from 2023, some of which you've probably heard, but most of which you may have missed. Follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Beats by Jer to stay up to date and connect with me. Let me know what you thought about these two records from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I'm Jared Harris, and this has been Beats by Jer.